Well, we were talking about third base, right? We've done it the last couple shows. We've talked about the platoon of Urias and Rojas. Now we're talking about Harry Ford or Cole Young playing third base. But what if they went and got a more solidified option than that down the road at the trade deadline? They got payroll in the budget. They haven't spent all of it this winter. It seems like they're allocating some of those funds. They continue to say payroll is going to go up. Could they be looking at a certain somebody down the road?
And that certain somebody you are referencing is one Nolan Arenado, third baseman for the St. Louis Cardinals. Do I think this is a good idea? I'm a little torn, dog. Not going to lie. I might need you to convince me here that this is a good idea. I am all for getting better at third base. And Nolan Arenado, for the last 10 years, has been one of the best third basemen in baseball, and he's on a Hall of Fame trajectory. In fact, just 2 seasons ago in 2022, he was top 3 in NL MVP voting at 7.2 wins above replacement. He had a career-high WRC+. He was awesome. He's a Platinum Glove winner at third base. He brings you everything you want to know. If you look at his Savant page, he is trending in the wrong direction in a lot of areas. He is showing all the telltale signs of aging, not just with the bat, with the speed, with the chase, with the defense, and he is owed a lot of money the next 3 years for an organization that claims they don't have money to spend. And if they're going to roll out of bed after trading for him at the trade deadline this season, and then 2025, they pay him $32 million to play third base at age 24. I'm struggling to see that.
So I'm going to try to sell you on a couple things, but first clarify, I think this trade is dependent on 3 things. Number 1, how do Urias and Rojas look as a platoon through the first 4 months of the season? I think that's number 1. Number 2, how does Nolan Arenado look through the first 4 months of the season? And number 3, maybe most importantly, how do the Cardinals as a team look through the first 4 months? The Cardinals last year were a disaster. Like, every single player had down years. They couldn't get anything going as a unit, and they had an awful season. They missed the playoffs in a bad division. Like, it was a forgetful season in St. Louis. Is that going to happen again? I don't know. I don't love their starting pitching, but that offense is plenty good enough to click and turn it around in, again, a bad division that just lost maybe the best arm in the division in Corbin Burns.
Two more things.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, so I was just going to wrap that up by saying, could the Cardinals have another bad year? Sure. I'm not saying that roster's perfect. There are certainly flaws. I would guess, though, you're going to see the Cardinals have a much better year than they did in 23. But it's all dependent on those 3 things.
They would need to have an absolute travesty of a year for them to consider this, I think, because they have a lot of years of Nolan Arenado control left. Here's another thing that I think first off, he has a full no-trade clause. He would need to say yes to go into Seattle. Mm-hmm. That is the biggest thing. You need to convince Nolan Arenado that the Seattle Mariners is where he wants to spend the twilight years of his career. That's the hardest thing. And then number 2 of points I think you missed here, the Vegas projections, win total projections, when you take a look at them, the Mariners and the Cardinals have the same win total. So the quality of baseball team in St. Louis, Vegas thinks is the same quality of baseball team win-wise in Seattle. That doesn't, I wouldn't say that wouldn't inspire a whole lot of, well, they're going to stink. The Mariners are going to be good enough to want to give up what is necessary to go get Nolan Arenado on the other side. And let me remind our listeners, Nolan Arenado has a very interesting contract that he signed with the Rockies. I'm going to give a shout out to one of my favorite baseball creators out there, Foolish Baseball. He made an awesome video on the Nolan Arenado trade from Colorado to St. Louis. And the Rockies, essentially, when they gave Nolan Arenado a contract back before the 2019 season, they essentially signed him as a PR decision to give him the contract, but not actually wanting to commit the amount of money to him, so they didn't have to pay him long term in the future, and they didn't have to spend a whole lot of money. As you can tell, the Rockies right now are just a disjointed mess of whatever. I don't even know how to describe the Colorado Rockies right now, but in that video, it describes that they gave Nolan Arenado, they signed him to, I think it was an 8-year contract, but they put an opt-out clause for Nolan after just 2 seasons. So they could say, hey, we signed Nolan, but then when he opts out after 2 more good seasons and leaves because, well, we don't want to match that offer, we're just going to let him go. It wasn't our fault. So that's why he eventually got traded to the St. Louis Cardinals before the 2021 season, where he had a down year. That's when the first opt-out was. He opted in. Then he has the unbelievable best season of his career in 2022, where he could have gone back onto the market after that 2022 season. He could have re-upped for another 10 years at significantly more money than he's making right now. And he would have, I think, 7 more years. No, he would have 8 or 9 more years left on his contract right now at an absurd amount. But he decided to decline the player opt-out after that season and stay with St. Louis. If that doesn't tell you the guy is dedicated to staying in St. Louis and using that no-trade clause, I don't know what that is. I mean, he decided to stay in St. Louis twice, actually, 3 times. First was the trade, in which he exercised his no-trade clause, and he said, yes, I can get traded there. And then he declined the first opt-out, and then he declined the second opt-out. And now he's got 4 years left on his deal. 4 years left on his deal right now. So this year's worth $35 million. Next year's worth $32 million at age 34. 2026, it's $27 million at age 35. $15 million at age 36 in 2027, in which he's a free agent after that year. It's a loyal dude right there. I don't know how they would. I don't know how they sell him on that.
Well, how about the fact the Cardinals seem to be open to trading everybody at the deadline last year, including Nolan? So they kept him, but clearly they were floating him out there. Clearly the Cardinals didn't have an issue for the right package to trade him away. Now they didn't. They re-geared for 2024, hoping that this team can run it back and be much better than they were a season ago, because again, it was a down year. But they floated him out there. They said everybody's available. And that's why it all comes back to this for me. This is what I'm selling you on. This is a perfect trade to try and gauge at the deadline. Because for all the reasons you and I have both just mentioned, you will have so much more information. Because look, I saw the same thing as you. Everybody who's into baseball saw the same thing as the two of us. You look at Nolan Arenado's numbers, they're going down. His peripherals, going down. That's not a good sign for a guy that's aging. But if you give it 4 months in 2024, you're going to be able to tell, is it a trend or was it just a one-off last year? Because if he bounces back and he's in an all-star game next summer, then it's a different story. If he lets bygones be bygones and puts that behind him and he bounces back next year, then maybe it's not a trend. Maybe it was a one-off.
I don't think it's a one-off. This is a 4-year trend. Ever since he's been to St. Louis, his hard hit rate has taken a dip. So has his walk rate, his arm strength, his quality of contact, his average exit velocity. All in the last 4 years, they've gone down. 4 years, not 1. 4 years, even in that 2022 year, they have gone in the wrong direction.
Well, but 23 was worse than them all. I'm saying, like, he doesn't have to do what he did
numbers
once in Colorado.
Wise, it was, but I know we love our expected numbers. Taking a peek at his expected numbers, even in that 2022 season, they weren't very good. He had way better expected numbers in Colorado than he did in St. Louis.
No, his expected numbers in 23 were down from where they were in 22. Like, they took a step down. I'm not saying
they were. But there are some notable ones that are on a 4-year downtrend.
I'm not saying he has to get back to his Colorado peak. I'm saying if he's even 2022 Arenado, that's all right. Because again, like where his peripherals were in 22, this is going to happen at some point. He's an aging player.
Yeah.
But what he did in 22, paired with the peripherals, is fine. It's just that it continues to go down. So if it all trends down again in 24, yeah, I'm out. But if it takes a tick up, I'm listening.
I love Nolan Arenado as a baseball player. He had a 107 WRC plus last season. Do you think the combination the Mariners have at third right now could put that up?
Yeah, they can combine to be better than 107. But I'm saying this is again why this is a perfect thing to gauge at the deadline. What if Arenado's at 135 at the deadline? Then all of a sudden you're like, okay,
Then I'm down.
that's what I'm getting at. If you were to say, let's trade for Nolan Arenado right now, number one, there would be no chance because the Cardinals are set on trying to win, at least to start in 2024. And nobody can love what he did both on basics, like on his WRC plus numbers and his batted ball data in 2023. We're all in agreement with that. But again, if it all goes up in 24, if he's WRC plusing 130 to 135, I'm listening. Because along with that, there's no way the Mariners are taking on all that money. They'd have to take on some, but they're not taking on $32 million in 2025. They take on some of it, but I'm sure the Cardinals would also eat some of it.
Well, that would cost significant prospect capital. I'm going to come back to the Mariners might listen. Yeah. Well, the Cardinals might listen if the Mariners start floating some real prospects out there. Will Nolan Arenado listen to the Seattle Mariners?
Depends on what they're looking like on the field. If it's compared to like your Fangraphs projection and them and the Cardinals are at about the same win total, no. And in that situation, not only are the Mariners probably not trading for him, but the Cardinals aren't likely dealing him away. But if the Mariners are at the top of the AL West and they're winning and got this young team.
By how many games at the top of the AL West? Like runaway?
It's hard to say they'd run away, but you know what? If they're like far enough over 500 where even if it's a 2-game lead of the West, and if they were to fall back, they'd still be in the wild card. They'd have a wild card spot. I feel like it'd be hard for Nolan to say no to that, especially if, again, the Mariners aren't a one-year wonder. This is a core that's going to be together for a few years. And if the Cardinals are bad, then yeah. Look, when it's all said and done, it's unlikely this trade is happening, right? I'm trying to make a case for why it could happen. Like, this is very unlikely for all the obstacles that we have laid out, both you and I both. But if you want to look at the glass half full and say, why could it happen? I'm painting the picture of how it could happen.
I will just say in my final point of this, we have long complained and articulated of why free agent hitters do not want to come to Seattle. This would essentially be a free agent decision, a 3.5-year contract for Nolan Arenado to come to Seattle, more likely than not, right? If he's going to get traded here. So he has control over the next 3.5 years of his life. This isn't a rental situation for Nolan Arenado. It would be convincing Nolan Arenado he wants to spend 3.5 seasons in Seattle. And, there's perceptions out there for plenty of players on why they wouldn't want to come play in Seattle. It's been the results of free agency, spending, team-wise, leadership-wise, etc., have been well noted with the results of noted free agency. So we'll see. We'll see if Nolan has an open mind, if the Cardinals have really hit the tank this upcoming season, and he would then reconsider his options.
Again, let's circle back to this in August. One way or another, let's circle back to this in August, because we're either going to look ridiculous or we're going to circle back to this and say, oh, well, maybe we can kind of rehash this. Maybe there's a chance out there. But one way or another, we're going to have something to talk about 6 months down the line in August, whether this is just an old takes exposed from a winter off-season show, or if it was, what were these guys thinking? Like, oh, what the meme of what did they know? So it's going to be one or the other.